Here, let us know if there's any sound problems. Alright.
We're live. Alright, cool. Hey, I'm Harrison, and I'm about to give you another lecture on the lost science of money. We're going to start to cover the reinstitution of money in Europe after the fall of Rome, and we're going to look specifically at Charlemagne and Venice, the rise and fall of Venice as a commercial power. And before I start that, of course, sorry about the noise. If there's any noise issues, let us know. There's a party going on right down below us. Our neighbors are having a good Father's Day here. And happy Father's Day to everybody out there who's having a good one. And my solidarity, my sympathy, and my condolences to anyone who may not be having a good Father's Day. I know this is a hard day for a lot of people. It is for myself. There's a lot I could say about that, but the one point that I really want to drive home in today's lecture is that your family problems, much like my own, have everything to do with our current monetary system. And so today's lecture is dedicated to anyone who may happen to have a father, grandfathers, stepfathers, or even mothers, grandmothers, aunts, stepmothers, who spend more time criticizing you, your lifestyle, how you make your money, and what you spend your money on than they do criticizing our actual monetary system. Ask your parents today if they know how money is made. Ask them, you can give them a clue. Ask them if it's the banks that make the money or our government, like it's supposed to be under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of our United States Constitution, which gives our Treasury and our Congress the right and indeed the responsibility to make our money and circulate it in our economy and regulate its value. And of course, that hasn't been how this country has worked, especially since 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed. And this is when the private banking cartel, known as the Federal Reserve, took over the creation of our monetary supply and started charging our government, and therefore us, interest. And there's more to be said about that. But again, if your parents don't know how money is made and you feel that they may be a little abusive, you're not alone. Nietzsche was the first person to compare the relationship that parents have with their children to the relationship that bankers, creditors have with their debtors. And so in the Genealogy of Morals, in the second essay, he's wondering, where does guilt come from? Where does the phenomenon of guilt come from? This whole matter of bad consciousness. And he writes that the central moral concept of guilt, Schuld in German, originated from the very material concept of debt, Schulden. It's like the same word. The thought which is nowadays so proper and apparently so natural, so unavoidable, the thought which had to serve as the explanation for how the sense of justice came to exist on earth at all, the thought that the criminal deserves punishment because he could have acted otherwise, is in fact extremely recent and refined form of human judgment and logic. Whoever displaces it onto the origins of human judgment is guilty of tampering crudely with the psychology of mankind in its early stages. Throughout the longest period of human history, punishment was not exacted because the troublemaker was held responsible for his action. That is, it was not exacted on the assumption that only the guilty man was to be punished, but rather, just as nowadays parents still punish their children out of anger at harm done, anger which is then taken out on the person who causes it, albeit held in check and modified by the idea that any damage somehow has an equivalent and really can be paid off, even if this is through the pain of the culprit. Where has this ancient, deeply rooted, and by now perhaps ineradicable idea, this idea of the equivalence between damage and pain, drawn its strength from? I have already given it away. The contractual relationship between creditor and debtor, which is as old as the concept of legal subjects itself, and which points back in turn to the fundamental forms of buying, selling, exchange, wheeling, and dealing. So, the reason why so many of our parents give us their anger, give us their depression, give us their judgment and their resentment, and expect unconditional love, loyalty, support, and of course obedience in return, is precisely because we live in a monetary system in which bankers make money out of thin air, distribute it out to various enterprises who force us, the people, to work, give real blood, real sweat, real tears, in exchange for this money which is made of nothing. It's debt. It's made on strokes on a keyboard, as opposed to actual labor, as opposed to actual pain. And our parents and their grandparents and so on, all the way back to ancient times, have given the best of themselves, their positive energy, their work, their creativity. They've redistributed that up, back along the pyramid, the social pyramid, back to the 1%, modern and ancient, along with all of our wealth. This guilt is the result of our monetary system. And again, of course, the word between guilt and debt in German should not be overlooked, as discussed by Nietzsche. So, if you have the type of parents who would rather spend more time paying attention to the mainstream media than listening to you and what you have to say, then this lecture is dedicated to you. If your parents specifically spend more time listening to shows like Bill Moyer, and I don't know if yours do, then this lecture is definitely for you. I hate Bill Moyer. I know he's been in the news lately because he dropped an N-bomb on his show, and this really irritated the black community. Ice Cube, I remember, was on his show talking about how this word hits him like a knife. When he feels it, he feels hurt, like actual physical pain. Like that N-bomb. That's a fighting word. That's a torture word. Of course, Caucasian people don't get to say that to black people, because there's associations of violence and death and torture associated with that word. And if hearing that word, if a minority hearing that word from a Caucasian person, if that's anything like what I feel when I hear an old person raise their voice to me, try to threaten me, try to intimidate me, try to act like they're smarter than me merely because they're older than me, then my heart goes out. And, like, of course, our community doesn't get to use that word. But the reason I'm bringing up Bill Moore is because he doesn't know anything more about money and monetary reform than he does about race relations. This is from Greg Coldridge's Monetary History Calendar, which is a really useful tool. It's a really important supplement to the lost science of money. And on June 14th, 2013, there was a Facebook message sent to Bill Moore by Henry Melanie Kirchdorfer III, and they write, "Dear Mr. Moyers, an extremely interesting conversation with Richard Wolff today on WAMC at 2:30. He spoke of the critical problem with capitalism but failed to say what the problem actually was, and I found it interesting that even he decided not to speak of this critical problem. I urge you to go to Stephen Zarlenga, AMI.org, and read his book, The Lost Science of Money. The critical problem of capitalism is the private ownership of money by the Federal Reserve. Since the beginning of our country in the fractional reserve system, basing money is debt. I could go on and on and on, but thought you would rather be informed by reading this book. If you get a chance, tell me what you think. Thank you, Henry A. Kirchdorfer III." So, first off, I'm not alone here. I'm not the only one talking about this stuff. And Henry Kirchdorfer is absolutely correct. The monetary system is the problem, and the fact that Bill Moyers is ignoring this, the fact that Bill Moyers doesn't have the sophistication or even the interest in talking about something like this is all the more reason why he is a part of the problem as opposed to the solution. Like, there's a fine line between entertainment and reality, and he blurs this, in my opinion. You know, we have to start holding people like Bill Moore more accountable, so perhaps you can jump on this Facebook thread, click like, share it, support it, and maybe we'll start to see a change in the mainstream conversation if we put enough pressure upon our media pundits to start talking about the actual sources of our problems here. So, also, remember to check out the Monetary Reform Calendar from Greg Coldridge, another great supplement to this book. And of course, we have our home base here, Greens for Monetary Reform. And you can click on the History tab, click on this Class Materials tab here. This brings up all of the lecture materials for this lecture and for every other lecture. And there's a lot of really good history and jam-packed into all of these lectures, and lots of other supplemental materials on these other sites. On this site. So, moving on. Before we move on, quick review of the past 3 chapters we studied. We studied monetary systems in the ancient Orient, meaning ancient Sumeria, ancient Assyria, and ancient Egypt. And then we looked at ancient Greece, and then we looked at the rise and fall of ancient Rome from a monetary perspective. And so, what we start to see, before the rise of these major metropolis centers, I want to say 1600 BC, before 1600 BC. Let the other monetary scholars like Will and whoever else on the thread help me out here. But before we see the use of metallic money, what we see is that money was alive. Money was usually based on cows. A cow, of course, was equal to 140 talents of gold, which was equivalent to about 4 or 5 slave women. Another common source of currency was seeds, corn seeds or wheat seeds or whatever. It could have been anything. David Graeber, another book called The First 5,000 Years, talks about how rusty nails were used as money in Ireland, or cowrie shells in Africa, or how cigarettes become a form of fiat currency in prisons if they don't have access to cash, especially in like POW camps specifically. So there's no such thing as a society without money. And in ancient times, what we see is that money was alive. People would use animals, vegetables, living matter as a means of exchange. So one little custom that happened is that if you loaned your neighbor, a cow or some seed, it was customary for that neighbor to return your seed or your animal with some of the offspring produced by that plant or animal. So if that seed grew more wheat or something like that, you would get a little bit more of the wheat back as interest. If that cow got pregnant and had some kids, you would get, its offspring back as interest. So now moving forward, once we start to see the rise of these ancient city-states, these ancient Sumerian and Greek city-states, and the rise of this more priestly class that starts hoarding gold and silver as forms of tributes from pilgrims. Early tourism industry, people think that the world is more connected now due to globalization than it was in ancient times. We're going to see how that's not true at all, but ancient priests were the first bankers, and as they started to hoard gold and silver, they would start to loan this out as money, just like they would cows or seed. But now, the difference, of course, between money and cows is that money is barren. It can't reproduce itself. Money can't have sex and make more money, unlike cows or seeds, essentially. And so, priests would still expect more money back. This is the beginning of usury. Expecting more money back as interest off a loan. This is a holdover from the days when animals and seeds were used as money, essentially. So, the other thing that we see is that gold and silver, money, or commodity-based money, becomes a major issue during times of warfare. So, the other thing we find is that societies who rely on money that isn't backed by some sort of precious metal like silver or gold tend to achieve more culturally. They tend to be more stable societies, more secure societies, with better food, better art, better literature. And of course, the primary example comes from ancient Greece, when Lycurgus returns to ancient Sparta and institutes the Pelennor system of money, which were these iron bars that were heated up and soaked in vinegar so as to make the metal completely worthless. Once Sparta started using the Pelennors, all the theft, all the crime, all the prostitution started to clean itself up in the city because everyone had adequate money since it wasn't valuable anymore. And now, what we see is that the men in the society were able to focus on fitness and martial arts. And this is how they were able to train and defeat Xerxes with only 300 men. And these are all, they're really good supplemental materials that this particular stuff I'm talking about, the Pelennors and the changes to Spartan society, comes from Plutarch's description of Lycurgus in his book Parallel Lives. Plutarch, of course, being the father-mother biography. I believe I'm getting my Greek scholars right here. So, on the opposite hand, ancient Rome, we see the same thing. Ancient Rome started society off with bronze money, which was completely worthless. It was just issued by the government. And this most likely was a carryover from the Spartans. King Numa, who instituted this within ancient Spartan society, was a descendant of the Sabines. And that was a Spartan colony, so he most likely knew about nomisma. And this is nomos. Nomisma comes from the word nomos from Aristotle. And Aristotle, of course, wrote that money should be based on law, not on some sort of precious metal. This was, of course, from observing ancient history. So, things were going really well in ancient Rome when they were using this bronze nomisma. What happened during the Second Punic War, when Hannibal was destroying and ravaging the countryside with his elements and capturing up all this bronze money and using it against the Romans, using it to fund an army against Rome itself, that's when Rome switched to a new currency system based on silver. And after the Punic War, the bankers of Rome launched them right into another war. And Rome was now locked on an endless cycle of conquest to look for more and more land, more and more slaves to mine that land to extract silver and gold out of. Of course, the monetary instability continued throughout the rise of Julius Caesar and afterwards between the battles between Octavian and Mark Antony. And continued, lasted for a long time. And we're about to talk about how money was reinstituted in Western Europe. We're going to talk about Charlemagne's so-called revival, and how he how his successes had to do with the monetary system. And another more important example we're going to talk about is the rise of Venice, the rise and fall of Venice from a monetary perspective. And real quick before I move on, Are there any comments, any questions, or anything like that?
Well, it's commenting to agree with you.
That's good. Glad Will with us here as always. And before I move on, just to all of our viewers out there, we can't do this research, these lectures without your help. My partner Natalie, who's doing all the social media, and I, we've had a very, very rough year. For those of you who are friends, who know our personal situation, and we've been unable to work I've been unable to work for several months due to severe family trauma. I've had 2 siblings who commit suicide about a year and a half. I've been going to plenty of therapy and making lots of progress on my dissertation and so forth. And this work right here, what I'm learning from this book, is definitely a major source of therapy and catharsis and hope for me. And that's why I'm sharing this, because I'm not the only one who needs to know this stuff. Everyone needs to know this stuff. Like Nietzsche points out, all the bad blood in our families is due to bad money. And yeah. I just had something else important to say, but I kind of lost it a little bit. I'm about to move forward, but we really do need your donations. Even small donations, small token, symbolic donations really help with this work. And of course, the long-term goal here isn't just to get by. We are looking for long-term results. We're not sharing this knowledge for the sake of enjoying history, which we are here to do, of course, but this history supports a very clear solution. It supports sovereign currency in order. It supports debt-free currency issued by our government, spent directly into existence on the needs of us, the American people. And the legislative mechanism that's going to create our sovereign currency is, of course, the National Emergency Employment Defense Act, the NEED Act. This was a bill that was created by Dennis Kucinich and his wife Elizabeth Kucinich, who used to work with Stephen Zarlenga, who is the author of this book. And this book was a direct inspiration for this legislative mechanism that will one day give us the monetary system that we all constitutionally deserve and require in order to live happy, healthy, prosperous lives. It's just a matter of time. The more money you can give, the sooner we can make that happen. We're going to be giving updates. I'm going to be trying to get more of these lectures out on a regular basis to earn my keep, to earn our pay. We need thousands of dollars to stay in our apartment a month from now. So stay tuned, because I'm going to be cranking out more of these lectures. So, moving on. Rome fell, and the world's longest depression, known as the Dark Ages, began. And then Charlemagne fixed it all, according to my old high school history teachers, who really didn't know anything about monetary history at all. So, moving on. So, we already reviewed some of the stuff here. One, nature of money being purposely kept secret and confusing is something that we need to talk about a bit. But the main point here is that our current situation, our current economic crisis, has origins that have raged for over a millennia. The public versus private control of money. So, looking at the timeline, there's a lot of really good history here in this deck created by the Greens for Monetary Reform. And I'm just going to kind of quickly breeze through it to show you some of the important things. So Julius Caesar was the first Pontificus Maximus, and this was the office that predated the current office of the Catholic Pope. And this office had some pretty important functions, which are going to pop up in this deck. And then looking at as Roman history moves forward, the emperors didn't touch this office. This was the privilege of this office wasn't questioned for years, and the Pontifex Maximus, of course, resided in Constantinople, which was the seat of the Byzantine Roman Empire. So the Pontificus Maximus had certain privileges. They created the calendar. They granted titles of nobility, and they were the only people who could issue gold coins, which is very important. Local rulers could usually create silver, but they couldn't. Like Charlemagne could create his own silver. He could mint silver, but he could not mint gold. That was punishable by execution, as we've seen in previous chapters. So the other thing the Pontifex Maximus did was regulate the gold-silver ratio, which occurred between East and Western countries, usually at 12 silver to 1 gold. And we're going to see how silver flows silver flows west to east. And gold, a little bit of gold will trickle the opposite way to the rich. This chapter is important because of the role of Christianity. We're going to see some examples of Christian censorship with regards to monetary reform. The church had a lot of power too. It had a lot of functions. You got to remember the medieval Catholic Church was the government back then. They laid sewers, they swept the streets, they removed garbage. They maintained fiefs and land for slaves and for homeless people who were not allowed to be without land. You know, the homeless population, the homeless problem that we have now in our contemporary society did not exist in the Dark Ages or ancient Rome. You had poor people, you had serfs, you had slaves, but no one could be deprived of a place to reside. It's unheard of. It's historically pathological. The church also maintained or received revenues from birth, baptism, marriage, deaths, burials, taxes, and they filled all the offices. They also profited from fairs, festivals. The church was not just the government of ancient times, it was also the early entertainment and tourism industries. And they made a lot of money off it, as we're going to see. There were no except for Attila the Hun, there were no barbarian destroyers. The barbarians conserved institutions, government, laws, temples, arts, and including monetary systems. The rising of goths and northern barbarians due to Roman conscription of his youth. So, in the 5th and 6th centuries, we also see men giving possessions and wealth to the church in order to avoid fighting, in order to avoid having to fight in an army. So, the next major empire after the fall of Rome, the Frankish kings, Clovis and Charlemagne. I remember that in high school, our European history teachers talked about how Charlemagne was responsible for starting the beginning of the end of the Dark Ages. He reinstituted learning throughout the Catholic Church and empowered the church. And Zarlenga is very critical of this notion, and very critical from a monetary perspective. Of course, so Clovis in 496 was baptized Catholic, and this had a major expanding effect on the Merovingian Frankish dynasty. And looking at this chart here, also compares the timeline of Venice. So Clovis is getting baptized in 496. In 452 in Venice, Attila the Hun is killing all but about 100 to 200 families in Venice. And this has major ramifications for Venice. Later, several centuries later, they turn their population around by beginning trade with the Alexandrian Muslims, and they made lots of money. So again, Clovis' baptism in 496 was of immense importance, and this is when modern-day France starts to get organized under the Catholic Church. So this is an important map here. One thing that's important to know about the East-West gold-silver trade is that for a while there was this canal, the Arsinoe Canal in Egypt, and the Romans used this to trade to India, and so we see silver going east, and we see commodities, gold, silk, spices, and so forth. All the stuff Columbus was after going west. Charlemagne enters the picture here in 768. And Zarlenga talks about Charlemagne's revival as a false dawn. An early attempt to rebuild the monetary system was made by Charlemagne, 742 to 1814, around 768. Charlemagne is often credited with establishing a new monetary standard, with reinstituting weights and measures in the West, from which the pound, the shilling, and the pence notations evolved modern notations, hence why he's credited with evolving the ending of Dark Ages. But Zarlenga argues that Charlemagne's system was really a revival of some Roman traditions. The basis of Charlemagne's empire was actually military conquest and the enslavement of subjugated peoples, mostly Saxons. Using this extensive slave labor, he restarted or intensified precious metals mining at Scheminz, Krementz, and Rothensburg, mostly of silver, working the slaves to death in the mines. Those slaves not needed for mining were sold to Muslims through Jewish or Venetian intermediaries. So Charlemagne maintained a very complex network of power between Rome, Muslims, and Constantinople. And Charlemagne's relations with the Pope, remember that story about Charlemagne getting crowned from your high school history classes. So, Charlemagne's relations with the pontiff in Rome appear more complex because of attempts to alter the historical record. It cannot be too often repeated that the entire stream of history has been corrupted by ecclesiastics. Every historian has discovered these corruptions. Everyone has either boldly or timidly condemned them, yet there is always a new generation of unread people to whom these discoveries have to again be unfolded and these condemnations repeated, according to Alexander Delmar. The Pope claimed to be the sacred ruler of the West through the Decretals of Isidore, forged documents in which Constantine the Great had supposedly given the throne of the West to the Bishop of Rome in the 4th century. The use of forgery rather than an outright declaration of independence underscores the power that the Basilius, God's representative on earth, continued to have over men's minds. evidence shows that the Roman papacy became subservient to Charlemagne, depending on him and on his predecessor Pepin for military rescue when Byzantium's troops came calling. Delmar maintains that Pope Hadrian issued coinage as a vassal in Charlemagne's name in 772. There was also the unusual Christmas Day ceremony in 800 AD with Pope Leo in Rome, at which Charlemagne crowned himself emperor. Charlemagne snatches the crown away from Pope Leo and puts it on his own head and says, no, I crown myself. This all has to do with Charlemagne providing military power to maintain Rome, to save Rome from Muslims. So, the forgery that Alexander Delmar, Stephen Zarlenga's idol, is talking about, the censorship and the alterations to history. Also include another example around 803 AD called the Lost Treaty of Schultz. And Delmar writing again, many miracles are recorded in the books of this period, but the greatest miracle of all is not recorded in any of them. It is the corruption, mutilation, or destruction of every literary evidence concerning the origin, history, and legal relations of the Latin pontificate, the Pontificate Maximus, and the survival of the fables invented to supply their place. So this treaty, the most important aspect of this treaty was the highest privilege, which is granting the titles, changing the calendar, and the all-important gold coinage, and even more important gold-silver ratio. Because of this treaty, it was necessary for the Roman See to issue forged decretals of Isidore after death of Charlemagne. So this privilege, these main prerogatives of calendar, gold, and the ratio are a result of forgery, essentially. This is what Delmar and Zarlenga are arguing. So, Charlemagne appears to have stopped minting gold coinage. He didn't take that power for himself, and Delmar concluded from this that he recognized the religious supremacy of the Basilius in the Lost Treaty of Schultz. Remember the Muslim revolt? There was a local Muslim revolt. Check out previous lectures. After this Muslim started minting gold coins, he was executed. Charlemagne didn't push his luck. He didn't make gold. He focused on silver. Charlemagne probably did not achieve comparable independence from Byzantium, as measured by one ancient sign of it, the gold coinage prerogative. Byzantine power was limited, but probably still paramount in the West. Monetary conditions regressed after Charlemagne's death. The mines ran out of silver, and the Carolingian Empire ran out of conquests and slaves. And ultimately, the ratio, the gold-silver ratio, worked against Charlemagne's monetary system. It continued to put pressure on his monetary reserves. During most of the century, silver continued to flow east, which meant that Europe's silver money was continually being exported to India. The main lesson from Charlemagne is that a monetary system should never be dependent on the presence of exceptional individuals or the existence of available gold or silver deposits. So, Zarlenga argues that Venice, by way of contrast, is actually what prepared for the beginning of the Renaissance and the end of the Dark Ages. while the east-west ratio mechanism works against Charlemagne, Venice was able to harness the process to its advantage, thereby gaining a preeminent position in the West's economic affairs from 800 to 1500 AD, laying the foundations for Western Renaissance. Not Charlemagne. So, Venice has a very unique background. Their origin isn't entirely clear. They're not of Latin stock. They weren't a Phoenician, North African colony. They probably migrated from the southern coastal areas of the Black Sea. They were known for being really good mariners and traders. And according to Zarlenga, the city fathers still practiced the ancient ceremony or ritual of marriage with the sea, where a gold ring is annually thrown into the waters. And so Attila's Holocaust on Venetian society had a leveling effect. Their aristocracy had lost a lot of power, and they had to maintain their aristocratic status based on ability rather than inheritance. So there's a democratic ethos, and they lived and ate frugally, later placing legal limits on luxuries when, as Longworth noted, women were showing an unhealthy proclivity for conspicuous consumption. Another leveling factor was Venice's armed citizenship. Venice needed large numbers of freemen to row her ships, and a large portion of whom had to be armed with bows for defense. I'm going to pause right here just to point out that one thing that we start to see, armed citizenship, societies with lots of citizens who have a certain amount of military or martial literacy also tend to do a bit better militarily. The other examples, of course, being ancient Sparta, with their Pelennors, and ancient Rome with their bronze nomisma. There's something about martial literacy that correlates with military, or with monetary literacy, as we're starting to see in law, science, money. And it's really no surprise. Good martial artists, the ones that survive lots of tournaments or violent encounters, whatever, are typically very, very critical thinkers. We want to know what works and what doesn't, what's going to give us good results and what doesn't. So this passage here is from really cool. The Samurai. It's a must read for every martial artist. This is from the last chapter of the inner factors of martial arts. The outer factors of Jiu-Jitsu, and although admittedly impressive, he compared the visible part of an ice into the imagination, but it's only present. Although this is certain, like Miyamoto Musashi, for example, who perceived beyond those outer factors of the various arts. Other, more complex factors, less evident perhaps to the naked eye, but no less important in determining the practical efficiency of those weapons and their relative techniques. Failure to perceive these inner factors could prove disastrous, as it did for many complacent Bujin who had been trained only in the technical ways of handling a spear, a sword, or any other weapon, including his own anatomy. So, these inner and outer factors are something that are widely discussed by many warriors, including Miyamoto Musashi, Yagami Munenori, Takuan, and I sense that there's just from feedback with other people, who've reacted to our 420 Fight Club work, and the reason why we're pairing martial arts training with monetary education is precisely because of this correlation we see over history between martial and monetary literacy. Even though I'm advocating martial arts training in order to facilitate monetary literacy, I want to make it very clear that I am in no way advocating violence. Advocating martial arts training along with monetary history, if anything, will hopefully help shed stigmas of martial artists being violent, out of control people. There is absolutely no incompatibility between the art of war and the way of Satyagraha practice Gandhi. Martial arts is not violence. Capoeira, they often say that the more violent capoeira is, the less dangerous it is. But I know that there's a lot, especially within activist communities who follow the path of Gandhi and Satyagraha. I know that there's a lot of hesitance about it. And you see how this has its genesis in Gandhi. And he has an essay called Physical Training of the Satyagraha. He talks about how, and he compares military training, talks about how training is really important for militaries. He's interested in what kind of training would be best for violent militaries. And so he advocates yoga specifically. He thinks it's really important to be able to endure the capacity to endure heat and cold. You have to be healthy to be involved in civil disobedience. You feel a lot of pain. It's not for the faint of heart, of course. But Gandhi writes clearly that in the physical training of the Satyagraha, there's no room for weapons. The swords here. Far more terrible weapons than we've seen are in existence today. Of what fear will a sword rid him and the gods all for real imaginary? I have not yet heard of a man having shed all fear and learning armed swordplay. A slight introspection show that he who is always dependent on the sword finds it difficult to throw it away. That's not the case when you read the works like Munonori or Yumatu Musashi. Both the works are combined in this great text translated by Thomas Cleary. And he talks Cleary. Musashi talks the way of no sword, as does Yagi Munonori. And they're of course talking literally about how to fight someone who has a sword, how to disarm swords, just like we would. But there's also bigger philosophical implications of the way of sword, in complete contradistinction. Clear writes that swordless art, what modern men use in order to become a major industrial power in 1 century, in spite of its small territory and lack of exploitable resources other than human labor and ingenuity. Whether it is in the person of the individual warrior or in the public domain of an entire nation or culture, the essence of art is to make resourcefulness your resource. In his book of the 5 spheres, Musashi also makes this transition out from the warrior's way to the universal struggle for survival and excellence. The struggle for survival and excellence is, of course, what Gandhi is talking about. And Gandhi also writes, though, the doctrine of the sword, another said, interestingly enough, I do believe that when there is a choice cowardice and violence. Thus, my son asked me what he should have been present, and I was almost fatally assaulted. Whether he should have run away and killed, or whether he should have used his physical force, which he could to use. I told him that it was his duty to defend me, even by using violence. And it's also why I advocate training arms for those who believe in the method of violence for individual martial arts, but this is something we see in the broader military art of war that includes multiple combatants. And again, this is from Thomas Cleary, really good translation of The Art of War. We see again this whole less is more idea with regards to violence. So, written over 2,000 years ago during a period of prolonged civil warfare, The Art of War emerged from the same social conditions as some of the greatest classics of Chinese humanism, including the Tao Te Ching. Taking a rational rather than emotional approach to the problem of conflict, Sun Tzu showed how understanding conflict can lead not only to its resolution, but even to its avoidance altogether. And again, this comes from the Taoist influence in the art of war. The level of knowledge represented by the upper reaches of the art of war, the level of invincibility and the level of no conflict, is one expression of what the Taoist lore calls deep knowledge and strong action. In terms of the art of war, the master warrior is likewise the one who knows the psychology and mechanics of conflict so intimately that every move an opponent is seen through at once, and one who is able to act in precise accord with situations, riding their natural patterns with the minimum of effort. The Book of Balance and Harmony goes on to describe Taoist knowledge and practice further in these terms familiar to the quest of the warrior. Citation from the Book of Balance and Harmony now. Deep knowledge, like that of monetary history, is to be aware of a disturbance before disturbance, to be aware of danger before danger, to be aware of destruction before destruction, to be aware of calamity before calamity. Strong action is training the body without being burdened by the body, exercising the mind without being used by the mind, working in the world without being affected by the world, carrying out tasks without being obstructed by tasks. By deep knowledge of principle, one can change disturbance into order, change danger into safety, change destruction into survival, change calamity into fortune. By strong action on the way, one can bring the body to the realm of longevity, bring the mind to the sphere of mystery, bring the world to great peace, and bring tasks to great fulfillment. The next great Taoist text after the Yin Convergence and the Book of Balance and Harmony, obviously the Tao Te Ching. And like the Art of War, this was produced during the era of warring states, which ravaged China in the middle of the first millennium, BCE. And this great classic represents the prevailing attitude toward war that characterizes Sun Tzu manual, that is destructive even for the victors, often counterproductive. A reasonable course of action only when there is no choice. Another quote from the Tao Te Ching: those who assist a leader by means of the Tao do not use arms to coerce the world, for these things tend to reverse. Brambles grow where an army has been. Bad years follow a great war. Weapons are inauspicious instruments, not the tools of the enlightened. When there's no choice but to use them, it is best to be calm and free from greed, and not celebrate victory. Those who celebrate victory are bloodthirsty, and the bloodthirsty cannot have their way with the world. In a similar way, this is clear again, the Art of War pinpoints anger and greed as fundamental causes of defeat. According to Sun Tzu, it is the unemotional, reserved, calm, detached warrior who wins, not the hothead seeking vengeance and not the ambitious seeker of fortune. The Tao Te Ching says, those who are good at knighthood are not militaristic. Those who are good at battle do not become angry. Those who are good at prevailing over opponents do not get involved.
What book are you reading from?
This is from The Art of War, translated by Thomas Cleary. You compare that with what Gandhi is writing about nonviolence. Sun Tzu, Minamoto Musashi, Yagi Mononori, Takawan, they all say the same thing Gandhi's saying. They're like, violence is better than cowardice, but less effort is better. It's better to win as easily and as efficiently as possible. You don't want to be violent for the sake of violence, because that's going to mess up your technique. There's the reason why martial arts has a bad image. The reason why martial arts isn't more closely associated with political protest and with peaceful movements is unfortunately due to the stereotypes that we see of martial arts in mainstream media. But hopefully, that makes a little bit clearer. I hope to also talk more to create another lecture specifically just on martial arts and monetary reform. Again, I talked before. There's another lecture when I talked about the Kali principle of defanging the serpent, and this is no different than what Gandhi and Sun Tzu are talking about. You know, in Kali, in a one-on-one situation, it's infinitely better just to avoid the situation altogether if you can, but if you can't, it's better just to disarm your opponent, take away their stick, their blade, their fist. If you can't avoid the situation, of course, it's better to cripple or kill them than it is to allow yourself to be crippled or killed. There's a ladder of escalation, which is the complete opposite from the way our generals and our leaders conduct our military policy all across the globe, and even domestically here. The police don't even have access to training of this level of caliber. Our police require more non-violent martial arts training. The reason why you study martial arts, the reason why you study how to use swords and sticks and spears and bombs and monetary systems is precisely so that you can avoid being victims of them, so that you can disarm these things when necessary. So, back to Venice and their armed citizenship with their bows and their big ships. They're the basic unit of business in Venice during the early 100 years were the Kalingenza, which was borrowed from the Muslims, where the working partner went to sea and the investing partner stayed at home. They shared the profits, but the losses would belong to the investing partner. So, early in the 8th century, as the population of Italy reached its lowest ever recorded levels, Venice ignored Byzantium's prohibition on trading with Muslims and began trading with them. And the profits on this trade were immense, 100% per shipment. Venice was tapping into the low Asian gold-silver ratio in India through the Muslims of Alexandria. Venice's rapid accumulation of capital began with this trade. The gold-silver ratio was 7-1, gold-silver, and this gave the Venetians up to an additional 100% on their profits. The force that had for centuries been working against Europe's silver monies was turned to Venice's direct advantage. The fiat nature of this difference in the gold-silver ratio between East and West should be remembered. From the East came spices, especially pepper, silks, gold-weaved cloth, perfumes, drugs, and gold. The Venetians sold these inland at Pavia, which became the chief commercial center of southern Europe. To the east went slaves, timber, iron, and silver, the raw materials. Should catch up with my slides here a little bit. Okay. Let me leave it there. Crusades. So it was this trade with Venice, between Venice and Alexandria. We are Venice Arsenal, Europe's greatest shipyard or industrial enterprise of any kind. She built ever larger ships, which by 1300 AD could each carry 140 tons below deck. Byzantium came to depend on this fleet, and most of her traffic to Europe was carried by it. Venice's ships sailed for specific destinations at set months of the year in fleets pooling expenses and cargo risks. So, Venice became powerful, tapped into the trade, started building ships. Byzantium started to depend on Venice's military might, just like they used to depend on Charlemagne's military might. The other thing that we see once Venice starts making money is that they start to invest in their early tourist industry. The Venetian Doge, who was paid by Byzantium, he was elected locally, but the Doge needed something to maintain control over the sacred establishment, the sacred church of Venice. So they used it in the mummified corpse of St. Mark's, which was entombed in Alexandria. And this corpse was smuggled back in a barrel of pork. And then once this corpse of St. Mark's was brought back, pilgrims soon started flocking to the corpse. And Byzantium recognized Venice as a religious center. And so inspired by this success, Venice would continue to collect bones of other saints, eventually acquiring St. Stephen, St. Theodore, St. Donatius, St. Isidore, and even St. Nicholas, Santa Claus. And so pilgrims would flock to Venice to pay money to see these bones. So the Crusades. The First Crusade in 1095. And this is when overland trade routes get opened up to India. So Venice was slow to get into the Crusades. They wanted to stay out of it because, of course, they're trading with the Muslims. They don't want to get caught up in a war between Christians and Muslims, between Rome and However, Venice was surprised by the Crusades' success and joined it late. And they believed that a victorious crusade would establish an overland route to the east, which would nullify her route to the Egyptian Canal. So, during the Crusades, Venice abandoned the Alexandrian connection, and they traded overland via the Palmyra route. This trade became so important to Venice that 20,000 Venetian citizens of her 60,000 strong population lived in Byzantium to facilitate the trade. In 1204, aware that Byzantium was negotiating with the Genoese to replace them, Venice joined the conspiracy to divert the Fourth Crusade into attack on Constantinople. So by 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Venice attacks the Holy Roman Empire of Constantinople. And this is when the partially blind Enrico Dinaldo, at age 95, led the attack which toppled Byzantium in early 1204. Here's an image of the blind Doge Enrico Dinaldo being guided here by a boy. And Venice's fleet eventually toppled Byzantium. Cool. Thanks for hanging in there with me. We're almost done here. So, once this happened, Venice started using the share of the loot they raided from Byzantine to create their own currency, the silver grosso. And Venice started having lots of power problems with their new monetary system. Once the empire fell, Venice's money system had to stand on its own. She adopted strong measures to protect it from foreign manipulation. After 1250, any gold or silver coming into Venice had to be registered within the state before it could be sold. Only Venetians could export bullion or coin. From its arrival in Venice, as the funds of northern merchants do. So precious metal was carefully regulated by the Venetian state, and this helped maintain some stability in Venice for some time. The gold-silver ratio was kept loose in Venice. It was kept at 12-1 for many centuries. But after Byzantine fell, the ratio started to fluctuate. Venice rarely attempted to maintain a fixed ratio by law. Their trading mentality kept them from falling into that trap. They kept the ratio loose, allowing merchants the opportunity to make a profit on it, but not at the Republic's expense. Byzantium countered attacks on the ratio by enforcing the registration of precious metals coming into their economy. And this kept them alive for a while. Again, but the problem with this loose ratio is that it's foolish for a relatively weak legal power to present a stationary target when doing monetary battle with large commercial forces. Fighting in this case meant not presenting an easy-to-hit target. Bimetallic standards of individual states have almost always been vulnerable to speculative attacks and combined commercial interests. Venice developed at least 4 separate monies of count, 2 based on gold, 2 based on silver. Again, trying to keep things flexible so the system wouldn't utterly collapse. But eventually we start to see monetary dishonesty starting in Venice. Here's some images of the Grosso itself. Okay, let me get to the banking issues. So, in 1321, only the silver grossi became the accepted form of currency in Venice. And the result of this was that the money supply in Venice shrank. The demand for the grossi, the silver grossi, raised. And this certainly worked to the benefit of those holding the grossi, or for those merchants whom it was owed. But the reduction, these are the people who probably engineered the reduction. So then Venice's monetary system came under attack again in 1327 when bankers became aware of large amounts of gold coming back in from new trade relations with Egypt. The silver coming in ultimately overvalued. There's gold coming in. And this forced silver out of circulation. This was a massive outflow to Constantinople. So the grosso started to lose more value with this influx of gold. In 1345, a major turning point in European history happened, and this is when trade with India reopened. Venice appealed to the Egyptian government for reduction in silver, and this Venice again taps into the eastern ratio, and then gold starts flooding Europe. And this is right after the last panic when more gold was coming in from Egypt. So now, Venice's position would again be dominant in Europe because of her ability to once more tap into the Eastern gold-silver ratio and the spice trade. However, while the earlier trade had brought gold to Europe in exchange largely for slaves and other commodities, at this point Venice's intention was mainly to send the silver east in exchange for gold and spices. She would be doing what the Byzantine Roman Empire had done for centuries, destroying Europe's silver money system by literally exporting it to India. Venice exported vast amounts of silver to Asia, over 13 million silver grossi per year, about 20,000 tons. Europe was denuded of its money supply. By late 1300s, the silver famine reached crisis proportions. The crisis peaked in 1457 to 1464. Most mints in Europe were closed. In the north, only London's mint remained open. The crisis prompted Naples to mint a pure copper coin. 1472, Venice began minting copper. In 1473, and these developments were a step in the right direction. They should have kept going with that. But then some new silver mines were opened, alleviating the coinage shortage. And then, 1492, with the discovery of America, north and south, vast amounts of looted silver and gold began entering Europe from America. The inflow of plunder had the unfortunate effect of retarding the development of sound monetary thought. Then from 1503, Venice, whose leadership could not have been ignored, or whose leadership could not have been ignorant of the severe money problems they were causing in Europe, was knocked out of its dominant position in the eastern trade by Portugal's opening of the Cape route around Africa. 1503, we see in the timeline, this is when Venice starts to lose its power. There was a period when Venice used a little bit of nomismo, non-commodity based money based by law. It was called the tornacello. But it was nearly identical. It looked almost the same as the grosso, and it was put into circulation, paying for fortifications, outfitting fleets, paying for crews. It was again to support the military. But again, this, even though it was issued by the government, it was still silver, so it wasn't a true fiat system. It wasn't true nomisma. The Venetians thus obtained only partial benefits of a fiat money system. Perhaps they didn't think they had the power to gain acceptance of a 4 more times overvalued coin, which is what Roman nomisma was, which could have been enough to gain major advantages for their money system and their society. In the mid-1400s, coining machines came into use in Venice. Whereas previously a workman could manufacture 40 to 50 coins a day, it was now possible to produce thousands, reducing the value of money. There's another banking issue. After the fall of Constantinople, coincided with the fall of Byzantium. So during one later so through the treasuries again, another dodge These loans were called the imprestiti. Paid off an interest of 4%. The government would pay back. So that each citizen had a loan was based on an adjusted estimation of their wealth. Since these imprestiti were transferable on the books, they became into payment margins, and therefore very limited for money, even if they were never intended as such, and had no legal tender status. Some instances in the West where government debt was monetized, although unintentionally. The money supply was potentially increased by the amount of imprestiti loans in existence. Imprestiti loans eventually led up to the bank. In 1587, the house of these loans, making loans to deposit. This was among the earliest deposits in Europe, and was by the Bank of Amsterdam in 1609, which we can cover in the chapters. These zero banks, in theory, accept deposits and allow deposits to transfer amounts to their accounts of banks. But they're not, these zero banks are not going to make loans. They were considered very secure. But by seeing the bankrupt, there's been turmoil. Substituting the imprestiti loans to the government placed taxation to uncontrollable monetary consequences. When state debt was reduced to zero, creating imprestiti loans had increased the money supply, but letting them remove that supply. There had been private local banks in Venice in the 13th century, but around 1500, all except very small banks were bankrupt. One reason was because the requirement to pay for the CD that's on so easy banking. Most states were, I guess, lining against Venice, and then Portugal found the Cape route to India in 1503, and this ended the Venetian dominance, the East-West trade mechanism. By 1500, Venice was also in decline. Her ships were no longer needed, big, bulky. They got better ships, more revolutionary designs, improvement in sails. United cannon were replacing the archery with galleys, and by 1606, effective severe shortage of oak. One half of Venice's fleet was built in foreign shipyards, and maritime supremacy shifted to Holland. So, the lessons of Charlemagne and Venice earlier, it's not good to be commodities or exceptional. Even labor are labor rights. The cost of society creating and maintaining took up too great a is still true for today. Some of you are hopefully with the U.S. state, universal state income, there's legislature. It should be really cool. But we still, slavery. Guys, find out banks, different companies who force workers involves real time, real sweat, real tears, real loss, and all of that energy goes to the profit, to the benefit of these distribute that profit back to the bankers. So, why United States are to start distributing universal basic guaranteed income money free, this doesn't stop banks from making loans to gentrifiers and armies and police departments. This doesn't stop the cycle of war and slave labor. Anything, universal basic guaranteed income is only going to make the bankers richer in the long runs. Distributing some money to poor people so that they can distribute it right back up the ladder is only going to help them temporarily. This could be inflationary. Adding more money into our economy could lower the purchasing power of the dollar. It could make commodities more expensive, basic things like food more expensive. So until we have a monetary system that is interest-free, that is spent into existence, until our government starts giving money directly to the people without borrowing it at interest from the government, we're still going to see these same problems of war and forced labor. So, one of the other things that we learned from Venice here, in addition to even though they were able to tap into the gold-silver ratio, they didn't figure out nomisma. Their money system was still based on silver as opposed to law. And it seems like from this chapter that the bigger secret really is that money is based on law. This is harder for people to understand than the gold-silver trade of ancient times. Also, it seems like nomisma was the bigger secret in ancient times. You see references to this gold-silver trade. Like it seems like it was easier for Venice to figure that out, and you see it in other places. I was rereading Antigone by Sophocles, and I found a reference to this ancient gold-silver trade in this play. This is Antigone is the third play in the Theban trilogy by Sophocles, and it starts off with Oedipus Rex, one of the worst fathers ever. King Oedipus, of course, was prophesized to marry his mother, kill his father and marry his mother, and start a legacy of bad times for Thebes. So he was left out to die in the wilderness, as children in ancient Greece often were, as started by the Spartans. Of course, he was saved by a shepherd. He was raised. He encountered the Sphinx, saw the Sphinx's riddle, went to Thebes, killed his dad, didn't know it was dad, married Jocasta, who happened to be his mother, and he had 4 kids. Children were Polynices, Eteocles, Ismene, and Antigone, the name of this play. So after Oedipus died, Thebes went into complete disarray. Thebes became leaders of the civil war that started to rock Thebes, and Polynices joined the opposing side. Both brothers, of course, wound up killing each other, but Eteocles, who fought for King Thebes, buried with high honors, whereas Polynices was decreed to rot. He was left to rot on the battlefield in shame and dishonor by Commander King Creon. And so the play opens with Antigone, her sister's me, having an argument. Antigone is helping her brother against the orders of the King. And this is sort of when the play starts. Antigone, of course, goes to bury her brother anyway, and this puts his soul to rest. This helps his soul go down to the underworld, to Hades, where it's supposed to go. And then of course a watchman sees this. This watchman brings the news to King Creon, and King Creon gets really pissed off. He's like, who would have violated my decree? And he accuses the watchman of doing this, and the watchman says, no, it wasn't me. I have no idea who this was. And here we see the first reference to money in this play. Creon accuses the man of taking money in order to flaunt Creon's authority. And so King Creon writes, money is the nastiest weed ever to sprout in human soil. Money will ravage a city, tear men from their homes, and send them into exile. Money teaches good minds to go bad. It is the source of every shameful deed. Money points the way to wickedness. Doesn't look like Creon read Aristotle, though. It doesn't look like he knew about nomisma. Debt is the nastiest weed ever to sprout. Debt will ravage the city, tear men from their homes, send them into exile. Debt causes good minds to go mad, etc., etc. So, the watchman goes back to the body, uncovers it, stands guard, waits to see who comes back to cover it, and finds Antigone. And the watchman brings Antigone back before Creon, and Creon excuses the watchman and starts to try Antigone, essentially. And Creon accuses her of violating her laws. And then the key passage, the best passage from this play, Antigone responds, what laws? I never heard it was Zeus who made that announcement, and it wasn't justice either. The gods below didn't lay down this law for human use, and I could never thought your announcements could give you, a mere human being, power to trample the gods' unfailing, unwritten laws. These laws weren't made now or yesterday, they live for all time. Just like money, just like math, just like music, just like martial arts, just like morality, you bury your dead. These laws weren't made now or yesterday. They live for all time, and no one knows when they came into the light. No man could frighten me into taking on the God's penalty for breaking such a law. I'll die in any case, of course I will, whether you announce my execution or not. But if I die young, all the better. People who live in misery like mine are better dead. So if that's the way my life will end, pain is nothing. But if I let the corpse, my mother's son, lie dead, unburied, that would be agony. This way, no agony for you. But you think I'm a fool? It takes a fool to think that. So Creon is obviously very upset, sentences her to death, and this pisses off Creon's son, Haman, because Haman is engaged to marry Creon. And Haman starts to plead with his father, and here we have another passage which demonstrates the ancient roots of ageism, the ancient roots of conflict between young and old, the ancient conflict between the laws of nature and the laws that are placed upon us by social institutions, governments, families, etc. Haman says, and for me, Father, your continued good fortune is the best reward that I could ever have. No child could win a greater prize than his father's fame. No father could want more than abundant success from his son. And now, don't always cling to the same anger. Don't keep saying that this and nothing else is right. If a man believes that he alone has a sound mind, and no one else can speak or think as well as he does, then when people study him, they'll find an empty book. But a wise man can learn a lot and never be ashamed. He knows he does not have to be rigid and closed-hauled. You've seen trees tossed by a torrent in a flash flood. If they bend, they're saved, and every twig survives. But if they stiffen up, they're washed out from the roots. It's the same in a boat. If a sailor keeps the foot line taut, if he doesn't give an inch, then he'll capsize. And then he'll be sailing home with his benches down and his hull to the sky. So ease off, relax, stop being angry, make a change. I know I'm younger, but I may still have good ideas. And I say that the oldest idea and the best is for one man to be born complete, knowing everything. Otherwise, and it usually does turn out otherwise, it is good to learn from anyone who speaks well. In the chorus, in the Greek play, says, "Sir, you should learn from him if he is on the mark. And you, Hammon, learn from your father. Both sides spoke well." Creon says to the chorus, to the jury essentially, "Do you really think at our age we should be taught by a boy like him?" Hammon responds, "No, if I'm in the wrong, I admit I am young. That's why you should look at what I do, not my age." Creon, of course, doesn't listen. He maintains that Polynices has to rot and that Antigone has to be punished for violating his law. And she is left to die in a cave. She's sealed up in a cave. And something strange starts to happen in Thebes. Things are starting to go bad. And Tiresias, who has appeared in multiple plays, he appeared before. He's the blind prophet. This is, I believe it's the same Tiresias from the Iliad or from the Odyssey, who spoke to Homer. And this is when we see Tiresias eventually comes to talk to King Creon and get him to respect these natural laws, to stop putting his will above them. And this is when we see this reference, this ancient reference to the East-West gold ratio in ancient popular culture. Creon says to him, "I have a lot of experience with soothsayers. Your whole tribe has made a market of me from the start. Benefit, gain, if you want to turn a profit, speculate in gold from India or go trade with Sardis for electrum and traffic in that." Again, remember the ancient tourism industry. Remember the old priests and who would collect the relics of saints. Creon is accusing Tiresias, this prophet, of being a charlatan, of being a con man. And of course, he's not. He's being sincere. He tries to warn Creon. This is his final warning. And then eventually the whole scene collapses. The relations between creditor and debtor, the money, the law, culminates in death and suicide in the end of this play. Creon eventually relents, and he does bury the body, and he does go to the tomb, and he sees that the tomb is disturbed, the rocks are loose, and he sees that Hammon has gone inside. And after, the other thing he sees is that he's weeping by the body of Antigone, who's hanging down from a noose that she twisted to kill herself quicker rather than starve to death in this tomb she was left in. And my sister hung herself about a year ago after my brother killed himself. Sorry. But to see the same story repeating out again and again and again. When Creon saw them, he gave a horrible cry and came up to them. He was in tears, or Hammon came up to them. He was in tears, sobbing. "Poor soul," he said, "how could you do this?" Creon sang to Hammon, "What were you thinking? Had you lost your mind? Oh, my child, come out, please. I beg you on my knees." The boy did not answer. His eyes were fierce. He fixed them on his father, then spat in his face and drew his two-edged sword. The father darted back, dodged the blow, thwarted. The angry boy turned against himself. He took his blade and leaned on it, drove it half through his lungs. Then, still conscious, he pulled the girl into the curve of his sagging embrace. He gasped and panted, spattered blood on her white cheek, a spurt of scarlet. Then he was dead. His body lay with hers. They brought their marriage off at last in the house of death, which proves the point. In human life, it is deadly for bad judgment to embrace a man. So, Happy Father's Day. And if your parents spend more time criticizing you, how you spend your money, how you make your money, than they do criticizing how money is made itself, then your parents are a part of the problem. If your parents would rather pick fights with you over your lifestyle rather than go out and actually fight in the streets for your life, for your future, then your parents are a part of the problem. If your parents would rather use you as a passive audience to express their views rather than express their views in public, then they are a part of the problem. This is generational warfare. If you're anywhere around my age, if not, you could be older too, still having these same issues with parents, it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of self-defense to study the lost science of money. So with that, I think we're going to leave it there. It was kind of all over tonight. It's my first time back in a while. There's a lot of noise going on out there. Again, we're doing this lecture from home because the new school library is on summer hours. We're not going to have as much access to that. And also because we're trying to raise money to stay in our home. And we are full-time activists. Working on the NEET Act and teaching this history is my main priority. And it's a matter of life and death. So I think I'm done. Any questions, any comments? Didn't think so. Alright. I'm out. See you guys next time.